Welcome to Creativity in the Enneagram. I'm Samantha Mackay, a certified Enneagram coach and unconventional life coach. I'm deeply curious about the role of creativity in our lives, as creative expression is just such a core part of who we are as humans, and yet it's something that many of us have felt unable to truly embrace or engage in, including me. So, with this series, I'm hoping to understand what creativity can look like beyond the traditional characterization of creativity as being painting or drawing. So, I'm interviewing people of each Enneagram subtype to explore creativity through the lens of our egos, inner protection system, or our personality, as well as through the cultural lens that we grew up in. In these chats, we don't spend much time defining the characteristics or the motivations of the type we're talking about. So, if you'd like to learn more about that, I've included links in the comment below. In this interview, I'm talking with Ilona, a self-preservation 8, and we talked about the difference between making art in ego and out of ego. We explored how role-playing has helped her create a deeper understanding of her Enneagram type and how some of the 8's excessiveness plays out when it comes to creative materials. So I hope you enjoy this as much as I did. Today, I'm talking with Ilona, self-preservation 8, and you're based in Finland. So, first question, what does creativity mean to you?
For me, I think creativity is something that comes from inside. So it's not something that someone tells me to do, but it's a thing that I'm motivated to do myself, and especially doing something in a way that I want to do. So it's more of like this kind of free flow of things. I don't have to follow any processes or anything, but it's just like seeing what comes up and going with that. And I think there's also this kind of emotional component to it, where it's more like unknown. I'm not sure if unpressured is an emotion, but maybe not like not being in a hurry and that kind of stuff. And yeah, the flow, just seeing what comes naturally.
And what are some of the ways which that happens for you? Sort of just being in that sort of flow, exploration sort of space.
It's something. For example, being an 8, I might do things really quickly. So creativity might come up for me sort of like, I want to paint that wall. And then I just go to the store, I get the paints, and then I just paint the wall. But it requires that there's not that much else going on. So I have to like have the space for the creativity to come up.
So that's one of the things that supports you to be creative is not having too many things going on in your life.
Yeah. And also there might be a lot of things going on, but like learning myself to take a little bit time and downtime and slow down and give myself the space to for the creativity to come up.
I think the question that's coming up for me, and I'm curious, is I wonder how much of the creativity for you is an extension of innocence or moving into that sort of more innocent space, or is it not? Because I can assume there's creativity that happens in sort of that 8 personality sort of space and also in the more, innocent, lust versus innocence sort of dynamic there.
Yeah, actually, now that you mentioned that, I think there's quite a big difference in what kinds of creative things I do based on if I'm more in the personality or if I'm more aware. And if I'm more aware, I'll do more abstract stuff. And if I'm in the 8 personality, the creativity is more like practical and following certain rules. Well, maybe not rules, but it's more structured.
Self-preservation aids are very concrete, and so a lot of their work is to become more abstract. So it's really interesting
Yeah.
that you've pointed that out.
Yeah, I don't actually like abstract. So it's a little bit scary territory for me because I can't control it. Even if I mentioned free flowing and stuff, but there's still the element of control for me.
Mm.
I need to control what I'm creating and what's the outcome and stuff. But if I'm more aware, then it doesn't matter to me that much. So it gets more abstract. And I think, yeah, the distinction between coming more from innocence or coming more from lust is a good one.
I hadn't really thought about it until now, how you could be creative and create different things depending on whether you're more in personality or have more awareness. So I'm really glad that you've been able to share that distinction. Because I know you've been doing Enneagram work for a while. So you've been exploring your inner world for a bit of time now. Do you see your creativity more happening in your personal space or your professional space or both?
I think more on the personal space for my work life, because I work in IT business. It's not traditionally considered very creative, but of course, I'm a problem solver, which might not be that weird for an eight. But I think there is an element of creativity in my professional work as well, because especially for coming up with the solutions and figuring out what's going on and combining information. So I may have a lot of information, then I have to combine it and come up with something new. So I do consider that as a form of being creative. But I think more variety of creative things comes from my personal life, because I think it's somewhat related to what I said about there has to be this kind of space or downtime. So it's easier for me to do that on my personal life, because at work I'm just doing. So over the years, I've been doing crafting, I'm doing painting. One of my hobbies is live action role playing, which has been like for maybe 20, 25 years almost now. I think that's my main way of being creative, because it's sort of like body based. Because in
Mm.
live action role playing, you become the character and then you play out the scenarios. So it's maybe it's a good hobby for a body type.
Yeah, and I'm curious because you've been doing that for such a long time. What have you noticed that's changed since you started doing more work on your eight personality side?
I think it's brought more awareness to what kinds of characters I want to play, especially like some of my characters that I've played throughout the years. When I look back at them, I'm like, oh yeah, that was an unaware eight character.
Right.
Because when I haven't been so aware myself, it's been easy to channel stuff into the character. So nowadays I'm like more, maybe a bit more picky about what kinds of stuff I want to play. And also I think I nowadays tend to shy away from very powerful and like intimidating characters. I do have some of those, but it's more like I want to play things that are a little bit more soft and more nuanced and stuff. And I think it's related to my inner work, because it's so tiring being like all over the place all the time. And live action role playing is actually, I found that it's a very good environment for also like being helpful for my inner work, because there's this mutually agreed social norms and rules inside the live action role play, and then it's easy to explore different things there. So
Mm.
it's this more comfortable environment to figure out my own inner work stuff. Like now I want to play this kind of character who's maybe displaying some traits that I'm working myself.
It sounds like the way it's done, it naturally creates a safe environment for exploration and play. Like that's sort of built in and it gives you a lot of permission. And the thing I'm really curious about, and this is a little bit of a nerdy question, but how have you gone playing characters that are more five-ish or more two-ish? And like, what's that been like?
Well, five-ish characters I've played previously as well. I like them, but I also spend a lot of time being in the five space in my normal life. But I think the maybe the two space has been, for me it's been harder in my personal life and in my own growth, owning those traits and going
Mm.
there. So I think in the past I've had some characters that were pretty two-ish, but I think what I got out of playing those was I couldn't really maybe get into them, because there was still this kind of, I didn't want to go there fully. I haven't after I've been doing more inner work, I haven't actually had many or even maybe any two-ish characters. So I don't really know. But I think it would require for me maybe a smaller game, players that I know very well, because
Mhm.
that would be unknown territory for me, and it would probably be more vulnerable. So I would need the environment to be supportive to get to the two space fully.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting how you said that you almost couldn't get into those two characters fully because you're ego wasn't ready for it yet. And that seems like a great metaphor for so many different parts of our inner work as we start to explore different parts of ourselves and we see how they fit or don't fit as we play with those different pieces of ourselves. Now, do you experience sort of creative blocks or times when you sort of feel unable to express yourself creatively?
Sometimes, yeah, especially with writing, because if I do some creative writing, then if I have too much going on, then it's really hard for me to just settle and actually concentrate on doing that. And I think for most other things, I just usually deny that I'm having a creative block. I'm just like, I
Right.
didn't want to do that anyway. So so it's also like I'm like, yeah, I don't really experience creative blocks, but then I just may just like push them
Uh-huh.
away and not
Denial,
realize
such
I'm
a
having a
useful
creative
tool
block.
at times, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's more if I notice I would want to do something creative, but I'm like, oh, it isn't working. Why isn't this working? Then I usually nowadays I notice, oh well, I just have too much going on. I just need to slow down, ground myself, and create the space for the creativity because it takes a little bit effort for me, as we talked about the
Mm,
self-preservation aid practicality. So being creative is a little bit out of my like normal stance.
mm.
So nurturing it and giving space to it is key.
And I'm curious, you've used the word space a lot. And when I think about eights and body types, there is a sense of sort of controlling the territory and the physical space around them. And so I'm curious as to how you create a physical space for your creativity, not just a metaphorical, I'm carving out time type space.
Yeah. For me, most of my creative hobbies happen inside my house. So probably only the live action role playing is where I go somewhere else. But otherwise, it's sort of like my house is my creative space. And I may have depending a little bit of the situation, I might have a different, like inside my house, I may have a creative physical space. I may organize one room to be like this crafting room, but then sometimes I just like do crafts on the kitchen table or something like that. But it's usually if I do arrange a certain space inside my house, then it actually supports the creativity. It helps me to being focused in that instead of seeing I should do the laundry and like the doing energy goes in all directions.
The way to sort of focus it into one place and one activity. So how does knowing that you're a self-preservation eight help you in the creative process?
Well, after realizing my subtype and my Enneagram type, I didn't want to own it first. That what they say about self-preservation aids that they are really easily frustrated. But but yeah, I can see that especially with creative hobbies because especially I would love to be able to draw well, but I don't have the patience to practice and master it. And I think that's in a lot of my creative hobbies, it's the same. I want to be good. I want to create what I sort of see in my mind's eye, but because I haven't practiced, it doesn't come out that well. I think there's also some kind of eight tendency to as we age, we tend to think ourselves as omnipotent and I can do anything. So I think there's also like an element of course I can do this. And then when I actually start doing it, the outcome isn't what I imagined I would be able to do. So that creates also this kind of frustration and sort of like, why isn't it working? But after realizing this and going back to the abstract stuff, I think it's mostly if I'm more in personality and doing those kinds of creative things, like then the frustration comes up there. But if I'm doing abstract stuff, because I cannot control it, because it's abstract, I have no idea what it's going to look like. In the end, I have no initial thoughts about how this is going to look like. So it's sort of like almost healing for me to do that kind of abstract stuff because I have to let go and the frustration doesn't come up in those kinds of things. But I think that's something especially for maybe self-press aids because the frustration is like there all the time.
Yeah, like expecting that immediate satisfaction, sort of that immediacy that
Yeah.
the self-presate wants, and just and I know you said frustration, but I really felt disappointment. That sense of I'm so disappointed that it hasn't come out perfectly the first time, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And also there's this kind of I think maybe a self-pressed thing, like I don't want materials to go to waste.
Oh, interesting.
Like
Okay.
for
Like,
example, if I'm doing I do this kind of a polymer clay, like little figurines and stuff. And if it doesn't work out the way I want and I've already baked the stuff, it's sort of useless. I can't reuse the material. So I do notice in myself this kind of, but like I have to make use of all the resources I have and stuff like that. So
that's a really interesting thing about resources. And have you already purchased excessively of the resources before you get to that point? Just out of curiosity?
yes, yes,
Ah, right.
oh yes. I'm like, yeah, yeah. Now that you ask, I'm like, I can.
I'm
It's
so sorry.
impossible. It's impossible for me to start small. It's. I'm like, when I started doing the polymer clay stuff, I was like, well, I guess I should buy like 10 packs from the get-go just so that I have enough and stuff like that. And then most of it goes unused, but then I keep buying more. And the same is with all craft stuff. I don't do that that much crafting, but I'm always like, oh, maybe I need that kind of a paper. Oh, they have the same paper in different color. I'll just buy them both. Yeah, there's definitely like excess in getting
Love it.
all the stuff, but then I might not end up even using it. But yeah,
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand, but it's so interesting how clear that excessiveness is in that space to you. Like it's
yeah,
just so undeniably obvious.
yeah.
Um,
And also like I have sort of one extra room in my house, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should dedicate this to all my craft stuff. And oh, it's a larger room, so I have space for more crafting supplies. And I'm like, no, I don't even use the ones I have now. So I try to catch myself in the action when I'm like going to like this shopping mall or something, and I walk past the crafting store and I'm like, should I go in? And I'm like, no, because I know I'm like, oh, I don't actually need this, but I want it, so I'm going to get it. So there's a lot of that going on with the crafting and creativity. I don't need it, but I want it, and if I want it, I'm going to get it.
and that kind of cycle takes effort to change and shift. As someone who buys an excessive amount of books and sometimes stationery, and I understand the effort required to have less. So my last question is, what creation are you most proud of?
I initially I thought, well, I have a lot of like nice paintings, but I think actually for me the most thing I feel is creative and I'm most proud of is actually my own inner work, because I think that requires a lot of unknown stuff and
Mm,
the elements of creativity, like being in the flow and the innocence and being abstract and stuff. And because that's a thing that's helped me in my own life most, and it's really like important to me, and it's also something that's ongoing, and I don't know what kind of masterpiece comes out of it, but but yeah, I think
that is.
that's like if I'm thinking about creativity, then yeah, it's that
Yeah,
one.
I love it. I love that answer. No one's given that to me that. I love it because I mean, what I found within a work is there's so much changing perspective, finding paradoxes and finding alternatives and doing things differently and trying new things. And a lot of that happens inside the mind, and then you have to translate it into the physical. And all of
Yeah,
that requires this conscious effort, and it is very creative.
yeah,
It's a different kind of creativity that doesn't, yeah, just just
yeah,
different form. No, I love it. Well, thank you so, so much. This has been fascinating to hear the inside the creative life of a self-presate. So thank you.
thank you.